Oh my god. I've had enough of this.
Benito, why were you in my bed?
Oh, silly me, what am I doing? I need to record this video. Oh, let me get changed a second. Hello, everyone. Now, if you haven't gathered already, yes, I am currently on death's door. I feel so utterly shit, I don't know why I'm doing this, but here we go. It is the third instalment of my evolution series, and today we're going to start talking about speciation, specifically allopatric speciation. So speciation is the evolution of new species through time. Allopatric means that this speciation is occurring in the presence of a geographical barrier, and depending on what organisms we're looking at, the size of that geographical barrier varies. It could be like a mountain range forming, separating two populations. It could be just a fallen branch for some smaller animals that would split the population into two, so the two populations were reproductively isolated. Now, of course, there are many other types of barrier that would separate two populations, so it doesn't have to be a physical, geographical barrier. So we have these things called prezygotic or postzygotic barriers. Now, they sort of speak for themselves. So prezygotic barriers are barriers that occur before mating happens, and postzygotic barriers are barriers that form after mating. So prezygotic barriers could be temporal, for example. So the species are active at different times of day, so nocturnal and diurnal species, for example. I mean, those species still occur in the same geographical area, but they're active at different times, so therefore they'll never meet, and therefore probably never mate. So that's a form of prezygotic barrier. There's also behavioural barriers. For example, in courtship rituals, two species may have very different courtship displays, so that means that species will never mate with the other species because they have different patterns of display. So that's another barrier. There are also other mechanical barriers, so the structure of the sex organs, for example, may be different, so to put it lightly, it just won't fit. Sorry. So that would make two species incompatible, so another prezygotic barrier. Another prezygotic barrier is gametic factors. The sperm and the egg usually attract each other by releasing chemicals. They move along chemical gradients. The chemicals involved in this process between different species may be slightly different, so that means the sperm of one species won't recognise the egg of the other species, and vice versa. So remember, although mating technically has occurred, you know, the rumpy-pumpy stuff has occurred, this is still a prezygotic barrier because successful fertilisation hasn't taken place. Now, postzygotic barriers are mainly due to the viability of hybrids. So once a hybrid embryo is formed, it may just die prematurely. Alternatively, it could grow up, but the offspring just would be infertile, so couldn't pass on its genes to the next generation. You also get cases where the hybrid is fertile, but after more crossing of hybrids, the offspring produced becomes less and less fertile each time. So this is what we call hybrid degradation or hybrid breakdown. So after enough crosses between these hybrids, you'll get something which is infertile. So back to allopatric speciation. You've got one big population, and then it's cut in half by this river that forms in the middle of the population. So genetic changes caused by genetic drift in one population won't be transferred to the other population because there's no gene flow. So these two populations need to be isolated for a good length of time. So once enough time has passed, if you put them together again, they won't be able to mate and form fertile offspring. So there's a barrier there. So this is what we call secondary contact. Now this brings us on to our next difficult word on the board, and that's reproductive character displacement. Now, allopatry is when two populations are geographically isolated. Sympatry is when two populations occur together. Now we'll talk about sympatric speciation in the next video. But what reproductive character displacement says is that two closely related species differ more if they occur in sympatry, so if they occur together, than in allopatry, so if they were geographically separated. An example of this is in the Calopteryx genus, which is a damselfly genus, beautiful damselflies. They included things like the banded demoiselle, which are quite common in my area, but anyway, that's a little bit of background information. Now the wing patterns on these damselflies are very important in courtship, and what the scientists found, they took two species from this Calopteryx genus, and they found that when the two species occurred together in the same place at the same time, their wing patterns differed more than when they're separated. So what we're saying is that these two species of damselfly diverge into two different species through allopatric speciation, and then there are some areas where there's secondary contact, where they've come together and coexist together again. And these large differences in wing pattern when they exist together is to reduce the formation of hybrids, because remember, we've talked about how hybrids can be infertile or not as viable. So it reduces the frequency of hybrids within a population if the two species are even more drastically different from each other. So they can't mistake one for the other. So you can call this reinforcement. Now changes in the proportions of different traits within a population is caused by genetic drift. These are just random changes in allelic frequency that occur at any time. So you may wonder, what effect does natural selection have in speciation? Can we just rely purely on these random genetic changes through genetic drift, or does natural selection play a big role? Well, an example where natural selection is very important is an example with 3-spined sticklebacks in America. And it's an example of what we call parallel speciation. Now, parallel speciation is the repeated independent evolution of the same reproductively isolating mechanism. What the hell did I just say? Well, hopefully, when I go to this example, those words will actually form, a coherent sentence in your mind. So wait a minute. So in British Columbia, in North America, there are a collection of separate lakes. And within each one of these lakes, there's two types of stickleback. There's a benthic form, so that means it lives mostly on the bottom of the lake. And there's an open water form, or limnetic form, which swims about freely in the open water. Now, both of these species were thought to have been descendants of a common marine ancestor. Okay, and for this, I'm going to have to draw an extremely pretty diagram. So, give me a second. Now bear with me on this one, okay? Now, we've stepped back into the mist of time. And this marine form of stickleback has colonised this lake. Okay? And we represent that by this star here. Now, obviously, it's going from a marine to a freshwater environment, so it's going to have to adapt quite a bit to allow it to survive in this, alien environment. So, after that, it evolves a little bit. Okay, so we've seen this all in action, so this star is evolving into this rhombus-like thing here, and then eventually it's evolved into this square, and we can say that it is evolved for a benthic life, for example. So this fish now specialises on feeding at the bottom of the lake in British Columbia. He's having a lovely time. Then, after that, we have a double invasion. So that same marine ancestor that invaded the first time invades once more. So once that's introduced, we get this reproductive character displacement that I was talking about earlier, which means that when the two occur together, then there's greater differences in their morphology to reduce the frequency of hybrids within that population. So the star turns to a circle and the square turns to a triangle. That's a bit exaggerated, but eventually, after time, this circle, let's say, will not evolve to be a benthic stickleback, because that's what this species is already doing. That would just increase competition between the two species. That wouldn't be any good. So this, a stickleback in the double invasion, has now evolved for a more open water life. You know, swimming around in the open water, feeding on plankton and all that stuff. The open water fish could have evolved before the benthic one. I'm not really too sure on that. But what this does show, because this has happened in a number of different lakes, exactly the same thing. So in another lake you'll get another benthic and open water stickleback, and another you'll get the same, and so on and so on. So that just shows that this isn't random, because you'd have to be pretty lucky, you know, for this just to be a random process. Natural selection plays a massive part in determining this speciation. There are other factors which increase the rate of speciation. Sexual selection is one of them. This is where females choose males with the most elaborate traits. I mean, I think I did pretty well putting on this lovely jumper on today, but oh well. So between isolated populations, so ones with a geographical barrier, this may promote speciation, because the choosier trait in the female results in the more elaborate trait in the male being selected for. So these two traits, the choosy trait and the elaborate trait, evolve together in tandem. Now obviously these traits may be different between the two populations. Now we can show how important this sexual selection is on speciation by looking at birds. It's been shown that clades of birds which are dimorphic have greater species diversity. Just remember, dimorphic is when the males and females look completely different, and usually it's the male which is the showy one. So think of pheasants, peacocks, bullfinches. I mean, it's a bit of a random choice, but I love a good bullfinch. There are examples where it's the other way around, like redneck phalaropes, but let's not worry about them, shall we? What evidence is there for allopatric speciation? Well, we found that species diversity is greatest in mountainous areas. Obviously mountains form massive geographical barriers, so they're very important in isolating populations. An example being cryptic species of leopard frogs, where similar species replace themselves geographically, so depending where they are. Right, we've had a video all on allopatric speciation, but I haven't told you the two main types of allopatric speciation yet in this video, and that is vicariant and peripatric speciation. Now, vicariant is basically what we've been talking about for most of the video. So we've got a whole big population, then some geographical barrier slams it down right in the middle of them, separating the two populations. Easy, lovely. Peripatric speciation is also known as the founder effect. That's when a group of individuals from a population go and move off somewhere else and colonise that area. Then after that they just breed, you know, make happy families, have loads of fun wherever they are, and don't move back to their place of origin. So they're geographically separated, the two populations. And this has been shown on the islands of Hawaii. So you might think, Hawaii Islands, oh god, what exotic species have been studied on the islands of Hawaii? No, it's a Drosophila fruit fly. But of course, the boringness of the species is more than made up for by the name of the scientist who studied them, and his name was James Bonacum. And what he found was that closer related species were found on islands next to each other, which even further promotes this idea of their founder effect. So the Drosophila flies, if you like, leapfrogged from island to island, forming separate populations. Right, honestly, that's as much as I can take. It's about time I retired. Thank you for your time. Hope I wasn't too bad. Oh no. Oh no. Goodbye.